Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History. Signed, sealed, remembered, Gary Pepper and the Circle G. And today, from the archive, will arise the voice of Gary Pepper. And this is really going to be his episode about his memories of the Circle G. Hi, Keith. Hi, Anna. Hi, Colleen. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate seeing you here. And if you don't know who Gary Pepper is, in 1957, Gary was making a small amount of money by clipping newspaper articles and magazine articles about various celebrities. He would package these together for each celebrity, and he would mail them to the celebrity, along with a letter introducing himself and letting them know about his inability to work in a normal fashion. As you can see, he's confined to a wheelchair. And a lot of these celebrities would respond. And they would send Gary signed photos, well wishes, tokens of, of their love and hope that, and thanks that Gary took the time to make these clippings. They knew it was an effort for him and that he would send them to them. Hello, Marion. Hi, Emma. Thank you guys so much for coming. I appreciate seeing you here. So Gary made a very small amount of money that way. And it kept him busy and happy. And that kept his mother happy. And she's the one who really cared for him. And his father worked to support the family. And in 1957, he made a bunch of clippings. He put together a large batch of clippings as a scrapbook for Elvis. He had heard that Gladys was interested in articles about Elvis and was trying to keep her own scrapbooks. So he sent her this scrapbook. And she was very touched. And she invited him and his parents to visit. And she liked them so much that she invited Gary and his parents to Christmas at Graceland, 1957. The very first Graceland Christmas. And the only Christmas that Gladys ever spent at Graceland. And it was a very special Christmas. And Gary brought Elvis a very special gift. It was a white Bible. A leather-bound white Bible with Elvis Aaron Presley embossed in gold on the front. And this gift touched Elvis's heart. And he, in return, he didn't really have a gift for Gary. He'd never met Gary. He didn't really even know Gary was going to be there. But he had recently put out a gospel album. And he signed that album and gave it to Gary. Because he had a lot of promotional copies of this album. He signed it personally. He gave it to Gary. And both of those pieces are still out there. And if you'd like to hear that story in more detail, you can. It's on the Those Elvis Girls channel, where I tell stories about Bibles that Elvis Presley owned. And that was a really special one because it cemented the relationship. It was the foundational stone of a friendship that lasted Elvis's entire life. And Gary never wanted anything from Elvis other than to be recognized. Now, Elvis, he liked Gary so much that he hired Gary's father to work as one of the gate guards, one of the men that wore the EP on their shirt, like we've seen earlier in this series. Hi, Martha. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you. So his father was a trusted man at Graceland. And eventually, Gary and his family lived in a house that was right next to Vernon's on Dolan Street. And Gary, he kept the fans informed about what was going on in Elvis's life by writing articles that were published in various fan magazines. And that's what we're going to be looking at today. Some articles where he talks about the Circle G. And Emma says, one of Elvis's Bibles was available to see in my area recently, and that she is gutted that she missed it. It would have been so special to see. Yeah, I think so, Emma. That would have been very special. There's a whole lot of Bibles that are connected to Elvis. I've identified at least 28 that we know about, that we know a story about. And one of them was Gary's, that Christmas of 1957. And now 10 years later, he's going to tell us what it was like at the Circle G. And a couple of years after that, Elvis is going to have his greatest triumph ever. His return to the stage in 1969. And after his phenomenal concert, Elvis is still racked with fear about his upcoming performances and his ability to last through the 2 weeks. And Gary has sent him a telegram telling him how proud he is of him, that he's out here doing this. And Elvis writes him a letter. And he pours his heart out to Gary. And that's what this song is about that I wrote. It's called Telegram from a Friend.
The lights came down on Vegas gold. July heat, a crown retold. Applause like thunder, stars alive. But one true friend was not in line. A telegram, a quiet grace. From 12 years deep, a loyal face. I read your words, they calmed the flame. In all that noise, I spoke your name. I wish you could have been here, Gary. The velvet night, the roaring crowd. But in my heart, your voice was steady. A whisper soft, a faith unbowed. 4 more weeks, this fire will fade. I'll find my way back through the haze to Graceland's porch where silence sings and friendship wears no stage or wings. The suits, the gifts, the famous hands, they cheered the king, they made demands. But in the mirror doubt would stare, and only you knew what was there. I wrote you lines in trembling ink, not for the press, not for the drink, just for the man who saw me hold beyond the glitter, past the road. Say hello to everyone, I'll be home when this is done. The curtain falls, the echo fades, but you remain my serenade. 4 more weeks, this fire will fade. I'll find my way back through the hay to Graceland's porch where silence sings. Friendship wears no stage or wings.
Thank you all for gathering. This is Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And thank you so much, guys, for all of your compliments. I appreciate it. And Keith, you are absolutely correct. He had a lot of stage fright kick in before the first concert. But even after that concert, he still had it. Even though he had triumphed, he still had it. So let's pick up visually where we left off yesterday, which was this picture from 1965, where we saw a lot of the people that are on the ranch. And over at the far right, next to Richard Davis, who's the furthest to the right, and next to him is Marty Lacker. And we were hearing a story from Marty Lacker, and he had a great idea, and it was all going to come crumbling down. So we kind of left it on a cliffhanger, and we're going to leave that cliff a-hanging because Gary Pepper is going to step out to tell us some things before we get there. Because we can rely on Gary Pepper as the voice of truth. Gary Pepper never published a book. What we'll hear from Gary was published in the moment, written almost immediately as it happened, and published in the fan magazines like the following month. There was like a 60-day gap, maybe, between the time these events happened and that they appeared for fans to read. So these are Gary's true thoughts. Filtered as a fan, of course, but they are very close to his true thoughts, and he doesn't get anything from Elvis from this. Elvis is never going to read these fan magazines. He doesn't have time for that. He might read a couple articles here and there, but he relies on Gary to represent him as he wants to be represented, as he wishes to be. Gary is his voice to the fans. So Elvis tells him things. And Gary, he's not in this picture because he's not in these circles. He's not on the MGM lot. He doesn't go with them to do the movies. He visits. He doesn't go on tour. He visits the tours. You know, he doesn't live at the Circle G, but he visits the Circle G. So he's around. He shows up here and there, and Elvis confides things in him. So we're going to jump forward a year from that last picture. And this is a picture of the cast of Girl Happy. And on the left is Chris Knoll. And next to her is Shelley Fabares. I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. I never get that right on her. And Mary Ann Mobley is on the far right. And Elvis is between Mary Ann and Shelley, and he looks very happy. And they all have big smiles on their faces. Not Shelley, not so much. Hers is more of a contented grin than an actual smile. But all three ladies are extremely beautiful. And this is obviously some kind of publicity shot for the movie. And Keith was asking who was the guy behind the Colonel. Let's go back. Yeah, I don't know. That guy behind the Colonel and the guy next to the Colonel, I believe they're MGM executives that are connected to the movie that's being shot on the MGM lot. But I don't remember which movie it is. I'm sure if we looked at, well, I think if we looked at the credits for the movie, if we identified it, it would probably tell us who these two individuals are, or it would at least give us one of them, because I'm guessing one's the producer. One might be the director. Or one might be a studio executive. I think maybe the guy in the back, and the guy in the front is the producer or something like that. I don't really know. But they're unidentified, and even in the picture, the source that I found the picture, it listed them as unidentified. I'm sure that they are identified somewhere with this picture, just not where I found it. And Emma's saying that she loves Girl Happy and loves Shelley. And they do look great here. And Martha's saying she loves Shelley as well. And that I think Elvis made 3 movies with her. I know it was more than one. Not an expert on the movies either, but I definitely know that she was a multi-movie co-star. And that she always has very, very nice things to say about Elvis. Marianne Mobley, such beautiful things that she says about Elvis whenever you see her interviewed. And she's very defensive when people say bad things about Elvis. And I've also heard Chris speak a few times. And she's also a very beautiful person. So as we get into 1967, the year of the ranch, this is a birthday cake for Elvis. And you can see that it says, "Birthday greetings to Elvis from his loyal fans." So Elvis never actually got to see this cake other than as a picture, just like us, because it was given to him by his fans in London, all the way across the pond. So they ate it for him too, I'm sure, after the picture was taken, but they had a big party over there for Elvis. There's a lot of British fans at the time. And they constantly held Elvis celebrations of one kind or another. And Keith's saying, I think maybe it was Hal Wallace. I don't think it was, Keith. I know what Hal Wallace looks like, and I don't think that's him. Not saying it wasn't, though. I'm terrible at identifying people, too. So it might have been. It might have been. And Emma's saying that she would happily have played Elvis's love interest in any of his movies. And here we see Elvis with his friend Gary Pepper. And Gary Pepper early here in 1967. Now, we know from previous episodes that Elvis has things going on in his life. Stressful things that are happening in January 1967. Things like on January 2nd, his new agreement went into effect with the Colonel. And it says new stuff going forward that Elvis doesn't have to put actual work into, deals that the Colonel makes based on work that Elvis has done. Well, now the profits from that will now be shared 50-50 instead of 75-25 as they always had been. And Elvis has accepted this agreement. He signed it. He knew it was coming for a couple, 3 weeks. So, is he happy about it? Is he not happy about it? We don't know that part, but what we know is he buys the ranch, which seems to be a statement of control. He basically sets up a small kingdom where his word is law. But outside of that kingdom, like in this contract, he's lost some control. So it feels like he's fuming about it, but we don't know for sure. We know what some people think that he felt about it, but we don't know. But we do know that in the middle of the month, his beloved Uncle Pat passed away. And that was Delta's husband. And that's why Delta ended up living at Graceland for the rest of her life. Because Elvis didn't even hesitate. He brought her immediately to Graceland. And she lived there with her mother, Minnie Mae, until everybody was gone and Delta was the last one. And some people have very little compassion for Delta. And they like to tell this story about the time that she stormed out of her room in Graceland. She was at Graceland. They'd opened it. It had been open for a while, a few years. People were trampling through it every day. She lived there. Now, there was an area where they couldn't go, where she could live, but all day long you heard them. And they came through like herd elephants all day, every day, as long as the house was open for the day. And sometimes they'd see Delta. She'd be out there, or she'd be in one of the other rooms that you could see into, and she'd be looking at them. And one day, a fan commented on her wig and offered her money to purchase her wig, as if it would be some kind of Elvis souvenir. And she became very angry. And they say she was drunk, or that she'd been drinking. Now, Delta did like to drink, but it's not clear that she was drunk at this time, or that she was a drunk. That's not exactly true either. But she became very angry about this, about his offer. I think Elvis would have been fairly angry about it too if he'd heard. But Delta ripped off her own wig, the wig right on her head. She ripped it right off of her own head. And she lit it on fire so that it burned up in front of the fan so that he could never own it. And people say that shows that Delta was crazy, that she was mean, and she wasn't a happy person about everything that was going on. Well, of course she wasn't happy. I wouldn't have been happy about all those people in my house either. And of course she burned that wig. I mean, obviously it wasn't working as a wig. Somebody noticed it. That's not the purpose of a wig. The purpose of a wig is people don't know it's a wig. And then he was so rude as to offer her money for it, when she was a Southern lady and he was in her house. But this is a side note a tangent that I've gotten off onto. But Elvis loved his Aunt Delta, and that's why she was in the house. And he loved his Uncle Pat, and Uncle Pat was now gone. And these are the things that he was thinking about in January of 1967. So bad things. But Gary Pepper tells us it wasn't all bad. There was good things going on too. Gary says, as you have probably heard by now, our great mayor has renamed the Mid-South Coliseum of the Elvis... Let me start over here. As you have probably heard by now, our great mayor has renamed the Mid-South Coliseum the Elvis Presley Coliseum by proclamation. To quote the mayor's press conference release, the Elvis Presley fans, both locally and worldwide, named the Coliseum for Elvis. I only made it formal. So this was something that Gary and his mother had been fighting for in Memphis, and it was well publicized in the fan magazines at the time that they were trying to get the South the Mid-South Coliseum renamed to the Elvis Presley Coliseum, because obviously everybody was going to associate Memphis and a Coliseum with Elvis Presley. And Gary wanted that to honor Elvis. And the city government of Memphis at the time, they kept finding reasons not to rename it to Elvis Presley. And the mayor, who really wanted to name it Elvis Presley Coliseum, he finally just gave up and wrote a proclamation overruling everybody and say, this is it. And his reasoning is the Elvis Presley fans, they've already renamed it for us, that we can't fight. There's an old saying, you can't fight City Hall, but in this case, City Hall is saying you can't fight the Elvis fans. And Keith is saying that it seemed like all the movies had the same storyline with the pretty girls and the corny songs. They definitely had a lot of similarities. That's true. And Martha says she thinks that's why Elvis didn't like to make them, because they were all the same. Let's take a look at the actual proclamation by the mayor of the city of Memphis. This is the series Signed, Sealed, and Remembered. And here we've got a signed and sealed. You can see the seal at the bottom of the document. A signed, sealed, and we're remembering it. The City of Memphis proclamation by the mayor. Whereas Elvis Presley has distinguished himself in the fields of popular music and moving pictures, and whereas Elvis Presley has unselfishly served his country honorably in the military service, and whereas Elvis Presley has set an outstanding example for young people, and whereas Elvis Presley has maintained a dignity and humility that has inspired the admiration of millions of people, both youth and adults. And whereas Elvis Presley has received worldwide fame and acclaim, and whereas even though his career has required Elvis Presley to be away from Memphis for long periods of time, he has continued to maintain his house there and comes back home as often as possible. And whereas Elvis Presley has shared his good fortune, fame, and success generously with his fellow Memphians, and each year has contributed thousands of dollars to many worthy Memphis charities. And whereas Elvis Presley has demonstrated a devotion to Memphis, which has made Memphis known throughout the world as the home of Elvis Presley, and whereas a tremendous number of Memphians and other people throughout the world have expressed a desire that the city of Memphis recognize Elvis Presley by naming the Coliseum in his honor, and whereas the Coliseum provides a place for wholesome and all-around entertainment and recreation, which is characteristic of Elvis Presley, be it therefore proclaimed that the Coliseum shall be named Elvis Presley Coliseum, in witness whereof I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the city of Memphis to be affixed this 4th day of January, 1967, William B. Ingram, Jr., Mayor, City of Memphis. And so the city of Memphis honored its son. And this was a huge triumph for Gary Pepper. He brought this about. The fans helped. He needed the help of all the fans, but he spearheaded this And this is what he did for his friend. And this comes 2 days after Elvis's new contract with the Colonel, and the 50% clause goes into effect. Of course, Gary doesn't know about that. And Gary has more news for us. He says that Alan Fortis, now we know Alan Fortis. Alan's the foreman at the Circle G Ranch. Now, when Gary Pepper makes this announcement, Alan's not on the ranch yet. Elvis hasn't bought the ranch yet, but he is one of the guys. And he's been with Elvis for quite a while. And he's taking care of a lot of Elvis's cars at this time. And he also used to do a lot of Elvis's clothes shopping. But he's also handy with the cars. And so Gary Pepper says Alan Fortis's father died recently. As you probably know, Alan is one of Elvis's boys. And he also graduated with Elvis at Humes High. You can send sympathy notes if you like to Alan Fortis, care of Graceland, 3764 Highway 51, South Memphis, Tennessee, USA. So Gary's not quite correct about Humes High. That's not where Alan went. But Elvis did know him from high school because Alan was a famous high school football player. And, you know, if you were in high school at that time and you were into the football area, then you knew Alan if you were in Memphis. And then Alan became famous, fairly famous as a college player. But the really interesting thing about this note is that Gary's saying that if you you want to express sympathy to Alan, Elvis is willing to collect those expressions of sympathy. That Elvis has basically put his office at Alan's disposal in order to, because if Gary announces this, these things can't go to Alan's house. There would be so much mail that the mail people would go crazy, because just being connected to Alan or to Elvis, I'm sure Alan must have received hundreds, if not thousands, of letters of condolence and sympathy for his father passing away, because Gary announced this in a lot of fan magazines of the time. Keith is saying that the Coliseum was a big score for Gary Pepper. And Marion's saying, it's so great, no wonder Gary and EP were lifelong friends. And Martha says, Gary Pepper was such a nice person and he really loved Elvis. Right, he did. And that's why we can really give his words a lot of weight. And we can see that Elvis, you know, he really cared about Alan too. Because he must have known that Gary put this in. I'm sure Gary cleared this with him, or at least Vernon, before he put it into the magazine. Now, Jerry Hopkins, he wrote a biography about Elvis in 1971. And it was the first really decent biography about Elvis. And it's got a fair amount of errors in it, you know, as we would look at it today. But it's a beautiful example of exactly what the fans thought. If you were a fan that had the most access possible to Elvis without actually being, you know, a fan that got past the front gate. If you were somebody that just hung out there at the gates, but you didn't actually make it into the house or ever to the movie theaters. That's basically what this book is. That's the view of that kind of fan. Jerry, he didn't get quite that close, but he got pretty close. And he said Elvis had become a familiar figure riding horses at the Graceland grounds. and occasionally had gone riding at local stables, but neither seemed suitable. There wasn't enough at Graceland, just wasn't room enough, nor privacy anywhere else. So Elvis paid $250,000 for a one-story, one-bedroom, board and brick residence, some cattle barns, and the land, and immediately had it surrounded by an 8-foot cyclone fence. Now we know that that's not quite correct. In fact, most of it isn't correct, but the $250,000, it was $437,000. So Jerry got the message on the emotional truth that it was a lot of money, but he didn't really know how much money. All he had was some rumors. And so he put what he felt was like a lot of money in there. It's $250,000. But it was a little bit more. And Richie's saying that Jerry's book is a good book, and Jim Morrison gave Jerry the idea. And it's in the book that he thanks Jim Morrison for the idea. Yes, that's absolutely correct, Rich. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. Yeah, I really like Jerry Hopkins, and it's a great biography, I think, even though it's got, like, in this one paragraph, it's got multiple errors, but it gives you the right feeling, and things are mostly in the right order, and it's really how a fan would have felt about, or it would have known about Elvis at the time. And so it was as close to the truth as Jerry could get. And I can't fault him for not getting any closer, because Elvis had a tight security system around him, and his people were loyal at this time, and they weren't letting out a lot of information. And Jerry also wrote a book about Jim Morrison. Beautiful book, fabulous book. The name of it is suddenly escaping me. Memphis Flash Richie probably knows it. But if you ever get a chance to read the Jim Morrison book and you're into the Doors, I can't recommend it enough. Again, I don't think he's got everything right in the book, but it's clear that Jerry had great respect, if not love, for Elvis, and he had great respect, if not love, for Jim Morrison. And Gary Pepper says, after Elvis got so engrossed in his new hobby, horse riding, he sort of lost interest in showing midnight movies. He sees 2 rising suns each day as it is. In the morning when the sun rises and he saddles up his own beautiful horse, which is named the Rising Sun. So Gary, he immediately is in on, right, because Rising Sun shows up in like January of 1967. And this letter from Gary appears in April of 1967 in the fan magazines. So it's very quick. He's reporting like right up to the minute. And Gary goes on. He says, he started out with 3 horses, and now he is the proud owner of 17 fine, thoroughbred horses. The original owner of Graceland had horses and had a huge barn to stable them in at the back of the house. Elvis had the barn redone to his own specifications, and it's a real show place. It's equipped with stalls for each horse, and the horses' names are inscribed over the door of each stall. So we've heard this before, and we've even heard Charlie say that on Elvis's, it would say mine, and then on Vernon's he would write daddy's. But Gary actually goes further, and he tells us some more details. And he says the names of the horses are. Okay, now get ready, because we're going to go through 17 horses' names. And I think because Gary's able to name all 17 of the horses, I think we got to give this to Gary as the best documentation of the period. And we've seen various numbers float around about how many horses were at Graceland at this time. Some said 17, some said 20, you know, others had various numbers. I think one said 16, but now we know it's 17 and we're going to name them all. And Memphis Flash Ritchie, he's saying that Jim Morrison book is named No One Gets Out of Here Alive. Which is, I was going to say that, but I just thought that was wrong for some reason. But No One Gets Out of Here Alive. Beautiful book. It's got at least when I read it on the paperback, had a great picture of Jim Morrison on the front. And Memphis Flash Ritchie is just confirming that, yes, the name of that book is No One Gets Out of Here Alive. So here's the name of the 17 horses that Elvis had at the Circle G Ranch. Number 1, the Rising Sun. That's Elvis's horse. Number 2, Colonel Midnight. That's Mr. Vernon Presley's horse. Number 3, Buckshot. Number 4, Lady. Number 5, Keno. Number 6, Sundown. Number 7, Traveler. Number 8, Thundercloud. Number 9, Domino. Now, Gary does not note this, but that is Priscilla's horse. So I wonder if Gary realized that was Priscilla's horse, or if Priscilla ever saw this article, because I'm sure she would have felt like her horse should probably have been at least number 3, if not number 2. Number 10, and this I found to be the most surprising name on the list. And it's a special connection that I know a whole lot of connections between this name and Elvis. And Baz Luhrmann seems to know a whole lot of them too. But I don't know if the ones that Baz Luhrmann knows are the ones that I know, and I did not know this one until I read this article. But the name of horse number 10 is Star Trek. So did Elvis like Star Trek? I've seen that question asked before on different fan forums. Well, I think we could say yes. He has an expensive horse that's named Star Trek. Horse number 11, Sheba. Horse number 12, Scout. Horse number 13, Flaming Star. Now, I love this name because, of course, it was a movie he was in. But I feel like it's a call out to Barbara Eden, who was in the movie with him. Number 14, Beauty. Horse number 15, Golden Sun. Horse number 16, El Poco. And horse number 17, the final horse, his name is Mayor Ingram. And he was named in honor of our great mayor, the mayor who just put out that proclamation to rename the Coliseum to Elvis Presley Coliseum. And one last thing I'll note about the Star Trek name is that this is 1967. Star Trek is like in its first year. It's getting ready to go into its second season in the fall. So it's a current new show. And there are people on that show that Elvis knows. He's worked with a lot of them. And I think that's why he likes to watch the show, is that he gets to see a lot of his old friends. But I got a lot of stories about those, so maybe one day I'll be able to share all those with you. And this is a great time to say that if you've never heard all of those names of those horses before, this is all new knowledge to you. If you're learning new things right now with me as we uncover them together, make sure you hit the like button so that YouTube knows that you like this. And make sure that you subscribe and you hit the notification button so that you'll know the next time I go live or that I put out a new song as a music video. If you guys like that song that was at the beginning of the show, I haven't released that yet. It's not out there. It's only here on this live. So if you like it, let me know, and I'll see what I can do about getting it scheduled to come out. Also, tell everybody that you know that loves Elvis Presley to come on and hang out at Hillbilly Cat History, where they can hear these stories too with us and learn these things, like the names of the 17 horses. I don't think you've ever heard that anywhere else. I don't think I've ever seen it in a book. Might be in that book about the horses. I'll have to look at that and be sure. So I don't want to say for sure. And that's a good time for me to give my disclaimer. I'm not qualified to talk about Elvis Presley. I have no qualifications. I'm just here showing you what I found so that you can see what I see, and we can all make decisions from source material, like the picture that we see before us of Elvis riding his horse. He's not at the Circle G, but he is at Graceland, and it's during one of these periods. He's in the whole cowboy getup. And in fact, I know for sure that this particular picture is taken like in January or February of 1967. So this is those exact moments. And you can see that jacket he's got on that's so similar to the other jackets that we've looked at. And Memphis Flash Richie is saying that he's going to hit the like button now. Thank you so much, Richie. He's saying thanks for all the EP info. That it feels like I'm at the Circle G Ranch with the gang. Keith, that is exactly the experience that I am trying to bring. We've been on this ranch for quite a while now, just like Elvis and the gang. We've had the ups and the downs, and we're not even close to the end yet. We've still got a whole lot of this adventure to get through. And Terry, you keep on smiling, because I have a lot more Elvis fun stories to tell you. Now, Gary Pepper, he has something else to tell us about the Graceland property. And what Gary says is, also in the barn is Elvis's office. It is fully carpeted with office furniture, including Elvis's own desk and chair, a television, radio, record player, telephone, heat, and all the conveniences he needs, including a soft drinks bar. Does that sound similar to any other place that you know that Elvis has? His own desk and chair. That sounds very similar to his own office upstairs, next to his bedroom at Graceland. It's fully carpeted. That sounds like every room that Elvis has. It's got off of the office furniture of the desk and the chair. And then it has a television, a radio, a record player, a telephone, and a soft drinks bar, which sounds to me just like that room in the basement that they eventually put the 3 TVs into. But was originally, they had a screen and they could watch movies. They had a movie projector. And it has a soft drink bar in it. And if you've ever been to Graceland, I know for sure you've been down there and you've been into that area. It's all yellow and it's got the lightning bolt on the wall, but that all came in the 70s. Earlier on, it always had the soft drink bar. And you can still see where there's the movie projector's still there. There's a spot on the wall that you slide up and down. And the screen's still there. They just always rolled up. But he had, it's almost like a replica of one of these fun Elvis rooms, and he's just put it into the barn, and that's his office. I just find it a fascinating glimpse into Elvis, and nobody's told us about this. Nobody thought it was interesting enough in any of their own memoirs to let us know. So now we bring in a new character, and his name is Albert Goldman. But before we get to him, we'll take a look at this picture of the barn. This is Elvis's barn on the Graceland property. You can see that wire running to it. That's the electricity. So this is the barn that has the office we just described, like another Elvis fun room. So he's extended the Graceland mansion all the way over into the barn now. He's had the whole thing redone. It's all nice inside this barn now. It's not stinky and nasty like you're thinking a barn is. No, he's had this all spiffied up once he got into this hobby. And so everything is clean and nice, and it must be clean and nice if you're walking in and out of a carpeted room. Even if you've got people cleaning up after you. I've never been in a barn that was that clean. So it's an interesting place. Now, I've been in barns where the top floor is done. You can see, like, you could get a second floor up into that hayloft, and it'll be all done, but it'll still be kind of like a garage down below. And it'll be fairly clean because they're using it as a garage, but I've never been into a barn that actually had horses. It was clean enough that you'd have a carpeted area. But I have a very limited amount of experience with barns and horses, to be truthful. And here we get a close-up that they don't just call the barn the House of the Rising Sun. Elvis, he painted the name on it. He's had the name emblazoned on the side. House of Rising Sun. Now, I don't know who painted this, but I'm going to guess it's this friend of Marty Lacker's, because this friend who can paint is going to show up later in the stories. Not today. We're not going to make it there in this episode, but Marty's going to call in a guy that's going to do some painting, kind of like this. So my guess is that's the person who painted this on. Because you can see there's some... they didn't just write this up there. Someone of talent with paint put this onto the side of the barn. They must have used stencils, or they're very, very good with a paintbrush. Because this is a very fancy cursive writing. It's not calligraphy, but it looks like a font on a current printed piece of paper that came out of a computer. But it's painted onto the side of this house. So this is professional. Now, Albert Goldman, he's a guy, and we're going to hear a lot more from him coming up. He doesn't like Elvis. He really despises Elvis. And he writes a book about Elvis that comes out it's the first one that's a non-Elvis connected person. And so it's the first academic book about Elvis that comes out, and it's treated as an academic book, and it's full of terrible errors. But he does get some stuff right, and he used a lot of sources that are very interesting that we'll go into in a lot more detail in the future. But just to tease out the next episode, Albert says that the guy who owned the Circle G, Jack Adams, that Elvis already knew this guy. That not only did Elvis drive by the property all the time, he knew Jack, and that Jack had tried to sell him a airplane once, but that Gladys had put her foot down and said Elvis wasn't going to own an airplane, and that's why he didn't go any further in the purchase. But that Elvis actually knew Jack, and that's the first time we've heard this. So I don't know where Goldman exactly got that, but he was a researcher of repute. So the facts that he puts out, I don't have too many problems with. It's his interpretation of the facts. He sees everything as very negative towards Elvis. But that's as far as we're going to get in today's episode, because we've only got a couple of minutes left, and we just can't do Albert Goldman justice in that amount of time. And he is going to figure heavily into our future episodes. But I am going to send you guys out of here with a song about the Circle G, because we didn't really make it to the Circle G today. We just barely got back to the beginning, because I really wanted to introduce Gary Pepper, because he's got so much more to say. And he's going to be sprinkled in here with all the other guys. So he's going to be like the voice or the light of truth that's going to come in between all these stories and say, it was probably more like this than it was any of these extremes. And I think he's going to be very helpful to guiding us to the real truth. And Gunn says, such an interesting story. Thank you for telling it. His house, the rising sun. And Richie agrees that Goldman was, his opinions are worthless. It's the way that I would put it. His facts aren't terrible. Now, there is this treasure trove of original interviews that Goldman did, and they're out there, but we can't access them unless we know somebody that is a student or faculty at Columbia University. So if you know somebody that is a student or faculty at Columbia University, please beg them to come to the program so that we can get access to Goldman's original interviews with people that knew Elvis, people that you would love to hear these interviews from, and that we have never heard. All we've ever seen is bits and pieces that Goldman put into his book. But again, I'm off tangent. So until I see you guys again next time, I'm sending you out on this song about the Circle G that I wrote and was inspired by words of Donna Presley, who lived on the Circle G. And you all keep on taking care of business.
Lights came down on Vegas gold. July heat, a crown retold. Applause like thunder, stars align. But one true friend was not in line. A telegram, a quiet grace. From 12 years deep, a loyal face. I read your words, they calmed the flame. In all that noise, I spoke your name. I wish you could have been here, Gary. The velvet night, the roaring crowd. But in my heart, your voice was steady. A whisper soft, a faith unbowed. 4 more weeks this fire will fade. I'll find my way back through the haze to Graceland's porch where silence sings and friendship wears no stage or wings. The suits, the gifts, the famous hands, they cheered the king, they made demands. But in the mirror doubt would stare, and only you knew what was there. I wrote you lines in trembling ink, not for the press, not for the drink, just for the man who saw me hold beyond the glitter, past the road. Say hello to everyone, I'll be home when this is done. The curtain falls, the echo fades, but you remain my serenade. 4 more weeks this fire will fade. I'll find my way back through the hay to Graceland's porch where silence sings. Friendship wears no stage or wing.